The only way you can learn is by doing. The only way you can do is by being. That's Isaac Asimov, and it feels quite relevant for our mission today on the Deep Dive. Welcome along. Today we're going beyond just the headlines. We're tracing some really intricate threads in modern India, diving deep into its geopolitics, its bureaucracy, and some major societal shifts happening right now. Now, if you happen to be a UPSC aspirant, that's the Union Public Service Commission exams we're talking about, incredibly competitive civil service tests, well, this deep dive should be particularly useful for you. We're touching on daily current affairs, stuff that's absolutely crucial for your Manning's papers, and discussion points that, could pop up in prelims too. But honestly, even if you're not prepping for those exams, this is just vital public information. It's kind of a shortcut to being properly informed about what's going on. So the heart of our discussion today comes from some recent insights, mainly from the print, but also other credible sources we've looked at. We're going to weave these different strands together. Okay, let's unpack this. First up, India's civil services. How efficient are they?
What are the big challenges? It's fundamental, right? And what jumps out immediately is just how tough it is to get in. The Economist actually noted that India's civil services exams are even more competitive than China's.
Yeah, which is saying something, considering China tests candidates on Xi Jinping thought.
Exactly.
But a key point The Economist makes is that this intense competition, these sort of meritocratic intentions, they aren't necessarily the whole story. They argue that the heavy focus on rote learning, just memorizing for tests.
Right, the test-taking skills themselves.
Precisely. That focus, they suggest, contributes to what they call the middling performance of both bureaucracies, India and China. It kind of highlights a potential gap, doesn't it? You test intelligence, sure, but maybe not enough focus on practical problem solving or, say, ethical judgment. And if you look at the bigger picture, the World Bank's measure for government effectiveness puts China in the 74th percentile globally. India's a bit lower, 68th percentile.
So a system that's great at selection, perhaps, but maybe not always fostering the absolute best governance afterwards. And it seems this intense competition doesn't automatically fix everything either. The Economist also said, nor do the exams help eliminate corruption, another common scourge. We just saw an example, didn't we? June 9th.
Yes, that case in Odisha. A young civil servant accused of taking a bribe, about what, 1 million rupees?
Around 11,000, 12,000 US dollars, yeah, from a businessman.
It's quite revealing, that incident. It suggests that even with these super competitive exams trying to pick the best and brightest, you still have these fundamental issues like corruption popping up. It's not just about clearing the academic hurdle, It's about how the bureaucracy actually functions day to day, the accountability. It hints that competitive entry isn't a magic bullet. There might be deeper systemic things about oversight or maybe the ethical culture within the services.
Okay, so that's the internal picture, the bureaucracy. But how is India navigating the global stage? That brings us to foreign policy challenges. India's certainly been in the spotlight internationally recently, but, well, maybe not always for the reason it would prefer. The Economist opinion newsletter mentioned the G7 summit. Apparently, it did not go as planned.
Ah, yes, the detail about Trump leaving without meeting Prime Minister Modi.
Right. And then, to add, as they put it, salt to the wound, Pakistan's Field Marshal, Asim Munir, was invited to Washington around then.
Quite a sequence of events. It definitely sounds like a diplomatic setback. And looking at this more broadly, the Financial Times had a briefing. India needs a new foreign policy beyond diplomat Modi. Their take was interesting.
Okay, angle.
They suggested India might have been relying a bit too heavily on that personal relationship that Modi built with Trump during his first term. But Trump's approach now, it's described as much more transactional, unpredictable, even dismissive of his own staff's advice.
So personal chemistry maybe isn't enough anymore.
It seems that way. Despite all the talk about warming U.S.-India ties, America hasn't held back on things like trade pressure or immigration policies affecting India. It really shows how quickly international relations can shift. And there's this dual perspective from American officials, apparently. On one hand, they see India as, a really important counterweight to China. But at the same time, they don't want Pakistan drifting further into China's orbit. So they're trying to manage both relationships.
A delicate balancing act.
Absolutely. And Pakistan seems to be playing its cards, too, trying to cultivate ties with Trump family members, partly by positioning itself as a potential cryptocurrency hub.
A cryptocurrency hub, that's unexpected.
It is an interesting angle, isn't it? Maybe trying to tap into that sort of tech finance, libertarian-leaning interest group within the U.S., possibly around the Trump family, as a non-traditional diplomatic channel.
Wow, okay, so incredibly complex maneuvering there. But it wasn't all challenging news, was it? The relationship
Yeah.
with Canada seems to be improving.
Yes, that's a more positive note.
Yeah.
After being quite frayed, as reports put it looks like Modi and Canadian PM Mark Carney are working to restore normal diplomatic ties. That's definitely a step forward after recent tensions.
Good year.
But Veena Venugopal, writing in the Financial Times, brings up a wider, maybe more sobering point. She says that in this new global reality of multipolar chaos, personal friendships do not count for much.
Oof. That's quite blunt.
It is. It really underscores her argument that India urgently needs reliable friends and supporters, both regionally and in the West, not just for national security, but for economic growth, too. And you can see why, right? When you think about recent events like the border issues with China or that terrible Pahalgam terror attack, it just highlights the need for strong alliances that go beyond individual leaders.
That makes sense. It does raise the question, though, haven't personal ties sometimes helped smooth things over, even in messy situations?
That's a fair counterpoint. It's probably not entirely black and white. It speaks to that constant tension in diplomacy, doesn't it, between hard-nosed realism and, well, the human element.
Definitely. Okay, so let's shift focus now from the high-level diplomacy back down to shifts within Indian society itself. Starting with technology, specifically generative AI. This is the tech that can create new content, text, images, even audio. And it's literally changing how people sound, which impacts jobs. There's a specific example from call centers in Gurgaon, near Delhi. In 2023, a worker there, employed by a Paris-based company, had this accent-altering software installed.
Right, to make his speech sound more understandable to American clients.
Exactly. And apparently this worker had tried everything, everything in the book to change his accent before AI came along.
It really makes you think about how technology is reshaping roles. MV Prasanth, he's the COO for Teleperformance in India, told the Washington Post something interesting about this.
What did he say?
He said, "We don't see AI as taking jobs away. We see it as easier tasks being moved into self-serve. So the AI handles the simple stuff, allowing Kumar, the worker, and his colleagues to focus on more complex tasks. So it's presented as augmentation, not replacement, letting humans handle the trickier customer problems."
Okay, that's the company line. But there's pushback, isn't there? Critics are calling it digital whitewashing.
Yes, that term is being used. The idea that you're erasing cultural or regional accents for business reasons.
Which probably explains why the industry prefers a term like accent translation instead of accent neutralization.
Exactly. It's a subtle difference in wording, but it points to this whole ethical debate around AI, identity, and, well, efficiency. Though the companies using it would argue it's working. They say they're getting happier customers, the agents themselves are more satisfied, calls are quicker.
So tangible results from their perspective.
From an operational view, yes. But it forces that difficult question about globalization, doesn't it? Where's the line between making things efficient and potentially eroding cultural identity? What are the long-term costs? Makes you wonder, if AI can change an accent today, what's next?
Indeed. Okay, one more major societal development to touch on. India's been in the news recently regarding the deportation of Muslim residents to Bangladesh.
Yes, The Guardian covered this. Hannah Ellis-Peterson and Sheikh Azizur Rahman reported on it.
What did they find?
They reported that thousands of people, mostly Muslims, suspected of being undocumented immigrants from Bangladesh, have been rounded up across India recently. And the crucial point in the report is the allegation that many were deprived of proper legal process before being sent over the border.
They shared a specific story, didn't they? To make it more human.
Yes, a very poignant one. Hazara Khatun, 62 years old, physically disabled. Her daughter, Jarina Begum, said they had documents proving Hazara's mother and grandmother were born in India.
And she asked, how can she be a Bangladeshi?
Exactly. It immediately flags huge concerns about human rights, due process, citizenship, identity.
The legal protections people should have.
Absolutely. The story of Hazara Khatun really highlights the deep personal impact these policies can have, and it raises critical questions about the need for transparent, legally sound procedures when you're dealing with immigration status, especially when families are claiming deep generational roots in the country.
It certainly forces us to think about that balance between national sovereignty and, well, fundamental human rights.
Very tough balance.
So quite a journey we've taken today. We've looked at the nuts and bolts of India's bureaucracy, the high-stakes game of its foreign policy, and these really profound societal changes driven by technology and migration. It's clear India is navigating a really complex set of challenges and transformations.
It really is. And what's fascinating, I think, is seeing how these different areas connect. Bureaucratic performance affects how India handles geopolitics. Tech advances raise new social and ethical questions. Migration policies touch on identity and rights. They're not separate issues. They all weave together to shape India's path both at home and on the world stage. It's this kind of interconnected view that's so valuable, especially, as you mentioned, for those UPSC aspirants trying to get a holistic understanding.
Absolutely. So the big question remains, what does all this mean for India's future path? How might these trends play out? Definitely something to keep watching and for those preparing, something to reflect deeply on for your analysis. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. We really hope this deep dive helped you connect some dots and get a clearer picture of these crucial current affairs. And yes, especially if you're a UPSC aspirant, we hope reflecting on this helps strengthen your understanding and analysis for both mains and prelims. Please do like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment if you have questions or ideas for future topics you'd like us to dive into. Your feedback genuinely helps us tailor these deep dives.
Indeed. Join us next time for another deep dive into the stories shaping our world.
Until then, keep learning and stay curious.